Herrera. I'm the co-vice chair of the IRC. The time is, I don't have a watch. Oh, it's 11:16. So we'll start the meeting now. Again, thank you for being here. This is a beautiful facility, so thank you to the town of Cottonwood for hosting us, and thank you all for being here. Before we start, let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We unfortunately ran out of handouts, so for those of you that didn't get handouts and someone next to you does have handouts, if you guys don't mind sharing, you guys look like a friendly crowd, so get to know your neighbor, share the handouts, but we do have the maps blown up in the back. Also, if you did not sign in, please make sure you sign in. And if you plan to speak, we do need one of these yellow sheets from you. We will, to maximize public input, we will limit the comments to 3 minutes. And we will stick to those 3 minutes. So as soon as the buzzer sounds, that means your 3 minutes are up, and stop talking. So let me introduce a couple people. We have the IRC staff, starting with Christina Gomez, the Deputy Executive Director. We have Buck Forrest, our Chief Technology Officer. Buck. We have Shane Shields and Karen Herman, our Community Outreach Representatives. And then we have from on my right, Willie Desmond with Strategic Telemetry. And then we have Joe Canefield, who is our legal counsel, and I think he's participating via the web. So you may want to say hi to Joe. And then we have obviously the other commissioners that couldn't be here today, but they are, I think the majority of them are watching the video. We have about 29 to 30 of these public hearings, so we're not all, it makes sense if we split them up. So I attend as many as I can, and my other fellow commissioners attend as many as they can as well. So, and then we have Michelle Elam, the court reporter. So when you have someone, I think somebody's waving their hand. Did you need? Oh, I can definitely do that. Did you understand for the whole meeting? I will do that. So we have Michelle Elam, who's the court reporter. When you come up and speak, make sure that you speak loudly. Spell your name, first and last name, who you're representing, and also the city that you're from. And before we start with the comments, we're going to have Mr. Desmond, do a presentation on the second round of public hearings. Mr. Desmond?
Hi, thank you all for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Willie Desmond. Just 1 second. All right. My name is Willie Desmond. I work with Strategic Telemetry. We were the firm hired to provide technical assistance to the commission as it does the mapping. The purpose of the meeting here today is to hear your comments on the draft maps. The draft maps are currently under a 30-day review window where the public is encouraged to tell us what they think of them so that the final maps can be tweaked to reflect the will of the people. Before getting to the draft maps, though, I do want to just give you a little background and presentation on how these maps were developed and the process of redistricting here in Arizona. Okay. Arizona's redistricting process is governed by the state constitution, which was amended in the year 2000 following the passage of Proposition 106. Proposition 106 established the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission and laid out a series of criteria that should be followed when drawing new congressional and legislative district lines. The lines are adjusted following the completion of each census. The most recent census happened in 2010, and following the 2010 census, Arizona was allocated a 10th ninth and additional congressional district. Proposition 106 outlined the constitutional criteria that must be followed when drawing these lines. And again, because Arizona gained a 9th congressional district, the lines would have needed to be adjusted. Also because of population growth and shrinkage in different areas, the legislative and congressional district lines were far out of balance and would have needed to been adjusted anyway. So the first criteria is that all plans must comply with the U.S. Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. The second criteria is that all plans must have equal population. These first two criteria are federally mandated, so any redistricting that happens anywhere in the country must satisfy these two criteria. The other 6 are Arizona-specific and part of the Arizona State Constitution. They are that, to the extent practicable, the districts must be compact and contiguous, respect communities of interest, use visible geographic features, such as cities, towns, and county boundaries, and undivided census tracts. Finally, they must favor competitive districts where there is no significant detriment to other goals. Just to expound a little bit more on the Voting Rights Act, Arizona's congressional and legislative districts must receive pre-clearance or approval from the Department of Justice or a federal court under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act before they can take effect. To get pre-clearance, Arizona must demonstrate that the new districts do not discriminate against minority voters in purpose or effect, which means there can be no intentional or accidental discrimination. Under Section 5, Arizona's redistricting plans cannot be retrogressive. That means they cannot weaken or reduce minority voters' rights. Finally, the presence of discrimination can be determined by analyzing population data and previous election results. Okay, the redistricting process can be broken down into several steps. The first of which is to establish a commission. Commissioners were appointed earlier this year through a thorough screening process, and they serve in a voluntary capacity for the state of Arizona. Following that, there is a first round of public hearings. These public hearings are designed to hear the public comments about what they think is important in the redistricting, such as geography, communities of interest, minority voters' rights, and competitiveness. This year, the commission held 23 first round public hearings throughout the state solely to hear the public's opinions. Those occurred during July and August. The next step is the actual mapping. Per Proposition 106, the commission needs to start with a blank slate. They cannot pay attention to where incumbents live or the old districts. They start completely fresh. Following that, the commission has to establish a grid map. We'll talk a little bit more about the grid map in a minute, but what you should know is that it's simply a map that divides the population into as even and grid-like pattern as possible. This grid map only meets 2 of the criteria, though. It only has equal population and compact and contiguous districts. So what happens then is that grid map is adjusted to meet the other 6 criteria outlined in the Arizona State Constitution. Since adopting the grid maps, the commission has met more than 25 times to consider adjustments to the grid map and to accommodate all of the state's constitutional criteria. During this time, they not only met to adjust line moves, but they heard a lot of public input at every meeting and public comment, and they received citizens' maps and maps that different groups had created and wanted to turn in. Following the completion of that process, draft maps were approved. The draft congressional map was approved on October 10th, and the draft legislative map was approved on the draft congressional was approved on October 3rd. The draft legislative map was approved on October 10th. Following the approval of the draft maps, a 30-day public comment period happens, and that is what's happening right here. So there's a second round of public hearings. Currently, the commission is visiting, it says 25, but it's actually up to 31 now. Cities and towns throughout Arizona to hear what the public has to say about these draft maps. And this process has gone on throughout October and will continue in the early part of November. Once this process is over, the commission will meet again to vote on final maps. So upon completion of the final maps, they will be turned into the Department of Justice for pre-clearance. And again, because Arizona is subject to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, the district maps must be approved by a federal Department of Justice or a federal court in Washington, D.C. before they can be used for Arizona elections. So now just to go through the development of these draft maps you see today. On the screen you see the current congressional district map. This map was last used in 2010, was retired after those elections, and will be replaced by the maps that the commission is working on right now. Per Proposition 106, the starting point for those new maps was a completely blank slate. Again, they developed a grid map. The commission requested that 2 grid maps for both the legislative and congressional districts be put together, because there's multiple ways of making a grid-like pattern across the state to have equal population. They picked option 2 for both the legislative and congressional, and you can see that here. So once they have this grid map, they go through the process of adjusting those lines to come up with the draft map. As you can see here, this is the draft map. There's also copies in the back if you're interested in the packets. Some of the highlights of the draft map are 2 predominantly rural districts, 3 border districts, 3 districts in the greater Tucson area, 5 districts that are entirely within Maricopa County. The map avoids splitting Indian reservations, and there are 2 districts where minority voters should have an opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. Again, now going on to the legislative map. This is the current legislative map that was last used for the 2010 elections and is being phased out now. Again, we started with a blank slate for the legislative map and went to a grid map, as you can see here. Again, the commission met 25 times to adjust that grid map to come up with the draft map you see today. Some of the highlights of the draft legislative map are that the old legislative districts had very large population deviation amongst themselves because of population growth in area and loss in other areas. So the most populated districts in the old plan, there was 378,000 people living there, and the least populated had 155,000 people. So some districts are more than twice as big as others. This draft map has a deviation of from about 207,000 to about 215,000. Also, to comply with the Voting Rights Act, there are 10 districts in which minority candidates should have an opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. And the draft map includes 3 districts wholly within Pima County and 3 additional southern Arizona districts. There are 17 districts primarily within Maricopa County and 9 districts primarily rural. Okay. As we've mentioned earlier, the purpose of these public hearings is to get your input. A great way to do that is to attend these meetings and speak, so I thank you all again for being here today. Please feel free to speak about anything you care to, but possible criteria would be the constitutional requirements, the draft maps. You can also, besides speaking today, you can fill out one of the blue forms and turn those in. Your comments will also go on the record that way. Or you can fill out a form on our website, which is www.azredistricting.org, or call the office at 602-542-5221, or toll free at 855-733-7478. Now, we would encourage you to visit our website. There's a lot of useful resources there. As you can see, as you might be able to see, there are some red arrows here highlighting different areas of the website. The first of which is a meetings tab. That'll give you information on upcoming meetings, both their places and times. You can also go back and look at the old meetings. So if you're curious about how these maps were developed, you can go back and watch the 25 meetings where the commission met to adjust the grid maps. There you can watch the video, or you can read the transcripts. You can also fill out a public input form and submit it on the map on the website. And probably most important, you can go and look at these draft maps. So there's 2 places to click on and see the draft maps. If you do, you'll be taken to a page that looks a lot like this. The maps are available in several formats. There are JPEGs, PDFs, Google Maps. There's reports there on the population distribution, competitiveness, competitiveness, compactness, splits, the components that make up each of the districts. There's also mapping files if you have your own software and you'd like to upload the maps yourself. But I do want to talk just a second about the Google Maps. If you click on the Google Maps link, which is circled in red here, it'll take you to a page that looks a lot like this. It'll be a Google Maps page on your internet browser. And with this, you can zoom in and zoom out to see any level of geography you're interested in. You can go see your individual house, your neighborhood. You can follow the borders that make up these districts so you can see what streets they run along. By clicking on some of the buttons on the left, you can turn the shading on and off, the county lines on and off, and really kind of drill down and understand the maps better. So here's a example of a zoom in. Again, kind of hard to see, I apologize for that. But you can go all the way down to the house level and see, the street you live on. So I'd encourage anybody who's interested to explore that option. All right. Finally, we would like you to stay connected with the commission to hear more about what it's doing and how as this process goes along. Again, the website is www.azredistricting.org. On the website, you can draw your own maps. There's an online mapping tool where you can adjust these grid maps yourself, adjust these draft maps. You can watch the current meetings or the past meetings, and you can get updates on future meetings. You can follow us on Twitter at #AIRC or friend us on Facebook. So thank you all for being here today. Feel free to come up with and ask me any questions you have after the meeting. I'd be more than happy to answer them or to try to help find an answer for you. Also, feel free to use the staff here as a resource. They're very knowledgeable and can help you in a lot of ways. So thank you again for coming today. We very much so look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. As Mr. Desmond had mentioned, the purpose of these hearings is to find out what you're looking for in the maps, what areas you don't like, what you do like, and give us some detailed modifications and how these changes will affect your communities of interest. So that's the purpose of these meetings. We're not here to answer questions, but to listen to you and your concerns. Again, there's 3 minutes for each speaker. I ask that you be respectful of each individual, whether you agree or not agree with the comments. Let's be respectful of every individual that is here. They took the time to be here. So let's be respectful. And then we'll be starting now. So again, 3 minutes, and Buck will be taking time. And our first speaker is Diane. And if I mispronounce your name, I apologize in advance. So do correct me when you step up to the podium. And again, spell your first name and last name. Tell us who you're representing and the city, town that you're from. The first speaker will be Diane Jones. She's the mayor of the city of Cottonwood.
Thank you. Diane, D-I-A-N-E, Jones, J-O-E-N-S, and I'm the mayor of the city of Cottonwood. I'd first like to welcome everyone here today, and people from the Verde Valley live in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and they get pretty passionate about their place. So thank you for being here to listen, Vice Chair Herrera and other members of the commission who are on web TV today. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I am the mayor of Cottonwood, and I am elected to a nonpartisan position in service to the people. I represent the citizens of Cottonwood, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, Independents, or any other registered party. When someone calls for the fire department or the police department, they don't want to be asked what party they are. They just want service. I represent people who work and couldn't be here today, moms who stayed home with their kids today, and elders who just couldn't be here because of health challenges. The Cottonwood City Council has agreed that Yavapai County communities, both incorporated and unincorporated, are communities of interest and should be together as one district when the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission finalizes its maps. This includes all communities of the Verde Valley. Our communities constitute communities of interest based on our rural economies, tourism, and environmental interests, and our day-to-day interests, such as fighting drugs and crimes through MAP Force. Our Verde Valley and Prescott area public safety departments work hand in hand with our SWAT teams and PANT. We have been all working together for years on the Yavapai County Water Advisory Committee, and I believe our communities must stay together as we seek to ensure future water supplies. What Prescott area communities do with water decisions impacts the Verde Valley and vice versa. We need to sit at the table together to make these important decisions. In fact, our water decisions are extremely important even to Phoenix area residents because 1/3 of Phoenix area's water supply comes from the Verde River. The Phoenix area does not get their water from the upper Coconino Plateau. It comes from Yavapai County. We have 2 Indian tribes in Yavapai County, the Yavapai Apache Nation and the Yavapai Prescott Indian Tribe. Our tribes are connected with the Prescott area and not the Flagstaff area. Our Yavapai County School Superintendent is in Prescott, not Flagstaff. We are closely tied as a county with our children's educations. Our community health services and mental health services are intricately tied with Prescott. Many of our nonprofit service agencies are very much connected in Yavapai County, and these communities of interest are important to our citizens' day-to-day lives. We have a close connection with other communities in Yavapai County. We get along great with the Flagstaff area through the Greater Arizona Mayors. Our hospitals are connected, but our day-to-day lives are connected with Yavapai County as a whole, and we would like you to consider putting Yavapai County in one district. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If you guys can do me a favor, those that have cell phones, if you can shut them off, I'd appreciate that. Put them on vibrate or silent. Thank you. Our next speaker is Richard Demmert, Vice Mayor of Clarkdale. Probably not pronouncing it correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. My name is Richard Dahnert, spelled R-I-C-H-A-R-D-D-E-H-N-E-R-T. I'm Vice Mayor of Clarkdale, and I'm here today to read a statement from Mayor Doug Von Gossig of the town of Clarkdale. Madam Chair, or rather remaining members of the committee, please let me extend my thanks and respect for the public service you and your commission have undertaken for the citizens of Arizona. Yours may be the most difficult, the least understood, and is certainly the most thankless of all in politics. Any redistricting effort brings out extremes of partisan bickering, second-guessing, and demagoguery, and your project is unfortunately no different. I'm grateful to you for volunteering to take on this most difficult of assignments. The town of Clarkdale has followed your progress since inception through various maps and many trial solutions to meeting difficult and sometimes conflicting criteria. We understand the seeming impossibility of fitting competitiveness, compactness, political boundaries, communities of interest, and voting rights into a single district map, a map that cannot possibly please all of the stakeholders when your job is done. This understanding is why we have no critique of your actions, and we will offer only a few suggestions that could help our community in the future. The town of Clarkdale sits in a small extension of the proposed legislative District 6, along with the majority of the Verde Valley. The lines as currently proposed will include the entire current incorporated area of Clarkdale, but they do not include the areas identified in our community plan as our future growth area. We would like you to consider a minor redraw of that map, of the LD map, to include this growth area, thereby keeping our entire town in one district. This should not be problematic since only a few residents reside in the expanded area. Our Community Development Department will provide you with a map of our growth area so that this can be corrected. It is clear to the residents of Clarkdale that all of the Verde Valley's communities, both incorporated and not, comprise a single community of interest. We shop in the same stores, recreate in the same parks and along the Verde River. We attend regional meetings together, have school rivalries and common economic development goals, and are interdependent on the same regional economy. For these reasons, we ask that you make every attempt to keep the entire Verde Valley in the same legislative and congressional districts. By this, we mean keeping the entire city of Sedona in one district, along with the incorporated municipalities of Camp Verde, Cottonwood, Clarkdale, and Jerome, and the unincorporated communities of Big Park, Village of Oak Creek, Lake Montezuma, Rimrock, Cornville, Page Springs, and the Verde Villages. As I've said, we understand the difficult and complex nature of your task and request that you take the foregoing comments as constructive ideas that will help the town of Clarkdale and the Verde Valley continue to grow and thrive in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mike Ward, Sedona City Council.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm Mike Ward, M-I-K-E-W-A-R-D. I'm a resident of Sedona. I am speaking on behalf of myself, but I am also a member of the City of Sedona. I'm also a member of the City of Sedona Council. I would just like to echo what was just read. I would like to see Sedona retained in the Verde Valley. We are closely allied and we identify ourselves with the Verde Valley. And we would like for that to happen for both the congressional and the legislative redistricting. I won't take up any further time as the gentleman that spoke before me did an eloquent job of making my comments. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ronnie Jelm, J-E-L-M, resident of Sedona.
Thank you. First, I would like to say that I was shocked and dismayed by the actions of Governor Brewer's recent action regarding the chairman of this so-called independent commission. I believe it is and should be an independent commission, and it's actions like this that have people demonstrating all over our country. In regard to the actions of this committee, I think that you've done a wonderful job. And I would like to see, I'm a resident of Sedona, I would like to see Sedona and the Village of Oak Creek stay all in CD1 with people of like interest and included in with Flagstaff. But that would also include Sedona, Village of Oak Creek, and some of the outlying areas that aren't in the incorporated town of Sedona, but people who consider themselves to be citizens of Sedona. Thank you.
Our next speaker is, I think it's Rob Adams, Mayor of City of Sedona.
Good morning. My name is Rob Adams, R-O-B-A-D-A-M-S. I am the mayor of the city of Sedona. I first want to acknowledge what a tough position you folks are in the redistricting commission. However, most of us that have been in public service have been in these similar types of positions in the past, and essentially what you have to do is make your decisions based on what is for the greater good, and I'm sure that that will be eventually the outcome here. I'm speaking on behalf of the Sedona City Council as well as the citizens of Sedona. The City of Sedona supports a legislative and congressional redistricting outcome that is first and foremost keeps the City of Sedona intact and does not split the city by county lines. The city also values an outcome that creates a district that includes both the City of Sedona and the Village of Oak Creek, and that maintains the Verde Valley communities of Sedona, Cottonwood, Camp Verde, Jerome, and Clarkdale, along with the unincorporated communities within the same district. The City of Sedona also recognizes the Greater Arizona Success Legislative District Proposal 3 meets these values and also combines other communities that share similar common interests related to economy, transportation systems, healthcare systems, natural resources, including environmental health, forest health, and water resources, as well as economic development opportunities and ecotourism. I would also like to point out, and I'm assuming that the Redistricting Commission has received this map that has been created by the Rural Arizona Ad Hoc Eastern Rural Congressional District Committee that essentially achieves these goals in the congressional district. It changes the existing map somewhat, where it keeps all of the Verde Valley intact in one congressional district, as well as creates a rural voting district. So I would say, from my personal standpoint, I do not have the support of the council. We have not brought this to council at this point. We are going to talk about it Tuesday night. But this particular map seems to achieve all of those criteria. And we would appreciate if the districting committee would consider that. I can leave this map here if you're not sure of which one I'm talking about. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Susan Trout from Cottonwood.
Hello, my name is Suzanne, S-U-Z-A-N-N, Trout, T-R-O-U-T. Thank you. I want to thank the commission for what I think has been a terrific job. And while I do that, I'd like to cite the AIRC wants us to stay connected. I, in turn, would like to see the commission remain intact and free from outside political interference. Thank you. As I said, I live in Cottonwood. I work in Jerome. And I would like to see us keep the Verde Valley kept intact, just like the commission, and together with the district and Flagstaff. I believe that we have a lot in common with them just as much as we would with Prescott. Thank you again for your wonderful job.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Bill, and I can't understand his handwriting. I think it's R-E-G, maybe W-E-N? No. Sorry about that.
It's my handwriting. Thank you, Vice Chairman. My name is Bill Regner, R-E-G-N-E-R. I'm a resident of Clarkdale, and even though I'm an elected official of Clarkdale, I am not representing Clarkdale today. Thank you, Vice Chairman Herrera, and to the commissioners of the IRC. Thank you for the difficult job that you're doing, and we're hoping and praying that the end results of your efforts benefit our state. I think what you're hearing and what you will continue to hear today is a good example of the difficulty in determining communities of interest. While I encourage that the Verde Valley be kept intact, be kept whole in whatever maps you eventually adopted, I think some today are going to see that their community of interest is with the other parts of Yavapai County. You're going to hear some people today see that who live in this area see that their community of interest is with Flagstaff. I think that every map that you could possibly create will cause some people's communities of interest to be intact and others to be divided. Do the best you can there, and I know you are trying to do this. I think competitive districts are a little more scientific. You have voter registration to guide you, you have voter turnout to guide you. Basing districts on competitiveness brings the independent voter more fully into the process. And as you know, that portion of registered voters increases every year. Competitiveness also encourages voting decisions based on the quality of the candidates. Competitiveness also makes campaigns more about the merits of the issues, more about issues than ideology. Competitiveness governs to a greater extent the voting behavior of those who are elected. They can now vote in ways that support good governance and good public policy. So I encourage you to strive, whenever possible, to keep districts competitive, for better districts, and for a better state of Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Janice Graham, resident of Cornville.
Good morning. My name is Janice Graham, Graham. I am a resident of the unincorporated community of Cornville, and I would like to commend the commission on the work that they have done to keep things contiguous, competitive, and balanced as far as population and registered voters. And I would just like to reiterate that I want this to remain an independent commission, which is what the voters of Arizona want it to be, because the last time we went through redistricting, things got just a little bit slanted, and people decided that in order to have fairness in redistricting, that we needed to have a commission independent of the state legislature. And so I would like to go on record as saying I agree with that, and I am thankful that we have a commission such as yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have two speakers that are teaming up, Michael William Martin and Steve Calkins. What we'll do is we'll give both of you a total of 6 minutes.
I'm Mike Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N. If you remember me from Flagstaff, you may regret giving me additional time, but I'll try to be more succinct. To the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission, based upon the 2010 National Actual Enumeration. I represent the Black Bill Park Neighborhood Association. I'm a director of it. I'm not speaking on my own behalf. The Black Bill Park Neighborhood Association is a nonprofit neighborhood association whose announced purpose is to assist our neighborhood restore itself from the damages caused by the 2010 Schultz fire flood. The Black Bill Park Neighborhood Association specifically invites the IRC 2010 to impartially consider the needs of three entities. Our Schultz fire flood neighborhood, 2, the needs of our adjacent Flagstaff City neighbors, and 3, the needs of our adjacent Native American reservation neighbors. While we believe that these 3 communities of interest can be, we believe that these 3 stated communities of interest can be joined in both a single federal congressional district and a single state legislative district, simply, cleanly, and equitably. To that end, we offer 2 preferences. Maricopa, 1, consider Maricopa County Hall with its population of 134,421 included intact as the community of interest that it is. This keeps the county, Flagstaff City, the reservations in the county, the San Francisco Peaks, and the Schultz Fire Flood neighborhood all intact. By maintaining Coconino County whole and undivided, the Commission will discover A defined community of interest disposed to be a willing neighbor with 575,000 others, as you may select, that are in turn disposed to find us a willing neighbor with them in a federal congressional district. Second, a defined community of interest disposed to be, it's the same whole county, willing neighbor with 78,000 others, as you may select, that are in turn disposed to find us a willing neighbor with them in a state legislative district. Just keep us whole. Okay. In both such districts, the full array of societal relationships between Flagstaff City and the Schultz Fire Flood area will be maintained unbroken. In both such districts, the historical sacred relationships between the San Francisco Peaks and our neighboring reservations will be maintained unbroken. And then our second way of doing it is very narrow-minded, not narrow-minded, but very limited. And we really hope you can do the first. Maintain the Schultz Fire Flood intact in a district with its intact Flagstaff City. Attached is a Black Bill Park Neighborhood Association map illustrating this for a more limited second choice, but still a choice. please contact us if you wish that we can help you. Thank you.
My name is Steve Calkins, S-T-E-V-E-C-A-L-K-I-N-S. Members of the Commission, I want to thank you for the opportunity to hear us and hear our desires. I am the Secretary-Treasurer of the Blackville Park Neighborhood Association. We came together as a result of the tragic Schultz fire and flood that took place. The fire took place in 2010, and the subsequent floodings are continuing even to this day. We are presenting to you today a map which we feel illustrates the City of Flagstaff and Coconino County's testimony dealing with our neighborhoods. Typically, the county advocated for Donny Park, advocated for Timberline, and for Fernwood. The city, at the last meeting in Flagstaff, advocated for those areas as well as a half dozen more subdivisions. And I'd like to read to you the subdivisions that we would like you to consider keeping the community of interest of Greater Flagstaff full. They are, starting from the north on 89, these are flooded subdivisions, the communities of Wapatki Trails, Fernwood, Timberline, both platted and non-platted subdivision, commonly referred to as Wildcat lot splits, Hutchison Acres, McCann Estates, and then areas of Donny Park that were inadvertently, we feel, left out, including Mount Eldon Estates, North Peak, Linwood, Mountain View Ranchos, Cosnino, and Winona. And we certainly don't want to, we don't want to forget Winona, and I'm not going to break out in song. We feel that this satisfies the desire to make sure the sacred sites of the tribes are in District 7. All we're advocating for is the subdivisions and the infrastructure needed to contain the runoff and the rebuilding process in this area, which would include the City of Flagstaff dump, Cinder Lake landfill, and other infrastructure. I will leave with you a map. Thank you very much for your time.
Sir, Mr. Calkins, can you give that to Shane Shields, please? Our next speaker is Sandra Cosentino, business owner representing herself.
My name is Sandra, S-A-N-D-R-A, Cosentino, C-O-S-E-N-T-I-N-O. I commend you for placing the city of Sedona within CD1, and we request that you also include the greater area, Village of Oak Creek, Red Rock, Loop Road, Dry Creek Road, and the Sedona Shadows community. And this way you're not dividing our voting precincts and our fire district. And we're very closely allied to Flagstaff and the Colorado Plateau in regard to our role as a gateway to tourism in northern Arizona. We're also part of the Coconino National Forest, the whole Verde Valley. If possible, without doing major revision of your maps, I'd like to see the whole Verde Valley be part of CD1. I do not want to be drawn into a district that includes Prescott, even though they're part of the county seat. They're not part of the natural community of interest. I disagree with that earlier testimony. We don't have a seat at the table when in regard to Prescott. So I really appreciate LD6 as a natural community of interest. We're all rural communities along the Mogollon Rim and underneath the rim, that perhaps you should consider also putting Camp Verde in that, so the whole Verde Valley is intact within LD6 as well. But again, we do not want to be drawn into a district that would be under the control of Prescott. Prescott currently holds all 3 of our state legislative seats. We never hear from them here in the Verde Valley. They're not representing us. The Prescott supervisors also ignored public input and grabbed the new supervisor seat for themselves, now holding 4 of the 5 county supervisor positions. So going by county lines isn't a natural community of interest for us. And we're also in competition with Prescott for preserving the flow of the Verde River. So Chino Valley and Prescott are making decisions that drastically affect the health of the river to our detriment, and we have no say. So being in our own Verde Valley district with the other Mogollon Rim communities, I think we'll have more of a say of protecting our natural resources in the valley. And I also support making these districts a little bit more competitive. You've made great strides from the last map, and I commend you for that. And I also want to preserve the integrity of the independent redistricting community, free of the manipulation of the political actions of the Arizona legislature, that you need to stay independent. And thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Anita Simjian, paralegal with, paralegal from the town of Clarkdale.
My name is Anita Simjian. I just started. ANITASIMGEN. I agree for the most part with Mayor Jones and her statements. There are many people in the Verde Valley who have tried very hard to unify the people of the entire county of Yavapai in agreement with issues that are in common with us all, especially water, other community issues that we have been trying very hard to work out something that would be helpful to us all. The way your legislative and congressional maps divide us, it causes even more of an us against them ideology and negates the efforts that we have all made to make Yavapai a unified community.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Terry Nolan, Mayor of the town of Dewey Humboldt.
Yeah, my name's Terry Nolan, T-E-R-R-Y-N-O-L-A-N. And I'd like to reiterate Ms. Jones's comments to keep the county whole. I know you guys have a very difficult position here, and it's no matter how it comes out, no one's going to be fully satisfied. But, you know, the water issue was brought up here, and if you split the districts, there'll be more controversy about the water issues than anything. You know, I'm on the other side of the hill, but we all have community interest involved. As Mayor Jones stated, the GAMA, which is the Greater Arizona Mayors Association, we're all a part of that, and we all work together to work and solve problems for our towns. So with that, you know, just keep everybody in the county together. It's very important, you know, for that. Another issue is, you know, Yavapai County has been District 1 from the start of the state, and we need to maintain that number in that district for this area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Richard think it's Malik, representing himself from Flagstaff.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Mahalik. Richard, R-I-C-H-A-R-D, M-I-H-A-L-I-K. I'm here speaking for myself, as well as several hundred other people who have signed these petitions for me to speak for them, and also the former mayor of Flagstaff. In previous meetings, members of the current mayor and a group called the Flagstaff 40 and a lobbying group have been claiming to speak for all of us citizens living in the city limits of Flagstaff. And I'm here to repudiate that and tell you that there are many of us who have never been contacted. There's never been a forum or a poll taken, and therefore I think it's very unfair for the commission to just hear that they represent us, when in fact they represent their own special interest. Beyond that, let me just make the following statement. I believe northern Arizona is heavily tied to tourism in and around the Grand Canyon, and as such, we are very different than Maricopa County. While Flagstaff's the largest city in northern Arizona, it is still rural and rarely does have much in common with the urban areas of our state. We here in Coconino County have much in common with Yavapai County, Mojave County, and other northern and western communities in Arizona. Therefore, we should be placed together in a common congressional district. As an example, northern Arizona communities such as Flagstaff, Prescott, Verde Valley share economic development interests, transportation, education, forest restoration, water management, medical and healthcare interests, and of course, tourism. We currently work together on a common legislative issues such as the Greater Arizona Mayors Association, Northern Arizona Council of Governments, and the Flagstaff Metropolitan Planning Organization. The majority of the forest lands lie within northern Arizona, and this is of great concern for both Coconino and Yavapai counties. Additionally, Grand Canyon National Park is located within the counties of Mojave and Coconino, and we will be better served by being in the same congressional district. The business communities believe that whole counties and whole cities should be placed in a single district to the extent possible, while following the criteria spelled out in the Arizona Constitution, the Voting Rights Act, and the U.S. Constitution, along with all the laws that govern the commission rules. We recognize that the commission must follow the law and that you are not above the law. We appreciate your efforts in making sure that our congressional districts contain communities of interest as I've described. Please do not split Yavapai County arbitrarily to include parts of the Verde Valley with the Eastern Rural District CD1. The Verde Valley is the link between Yavapai County and Coconino County. Many of the problems with the draft map could be resolved by adding the non-reservation portion of Coconino County into the new CD4 and removing an equal population from Pinell County and CD4 and adding it to CD1, addressing many of the concern of our friends and neighbors in Pinell County. For example, Florence, Gold Canyon, Queen Valley, and the Santan Valley in Pinell County want to be currently in the drawn CD1, and the non-reservation part of Coconino County wants to be in the currently drawn CD4. That would be a very easy swap that would help create two rural districts and not make the commission have to completely redraw the map. If two rural districts and three border districts are truly desired by the commission, this can be accomplished without putting eastern counties in Pima County and without putting western counties in what is urban areas of Maricopa and Pinell County. Arizona has more than enough people in rural parts of the state to deserve a minimum of two completely rural districts.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I would like just add one thing on behalf of the former mayor. He had sent me 2 emails on his behalf to speak. He could not be here today.
Sure. Do you want to leave the information with
Can
Chief
I?
Shields?
That'd
Thank
be
you so much, sir. Our next speaker is Mel Copen, President of Big Park Regional Coordinating Council.
Hi, I'm Mel Copen. It's M-E-L and C-O-P-E-N. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. Big Park is a little bit of an unusual location. I'll just very briefly describe what we are. We're part of the greater Sedona area, commonly referred to as the village. About 6,000 residents, about 50 residential groupings, homeowners associations, and so forth. A distinct business district, and we straddle Highway 179, which was Arizona's first all-American highway. We're proud to be residents of Yavapai County, but in looking at congressional districting, there is a strong affinity that exists that goes beyond county lines, and it really relates to our relationship to the city of Sedona and the surrounding area, and of which a portion, of course, is in Coconino County. So the two counties are very much involved. And drawing lines along county barriers would, I think, put us at a substantial disadvantage. We're more than a community of interest. We are a community. If you look at what is going on, we have millions of tourists every year pouring in through Big Park into the city of Sedona, into the surrounding areas. They travel that 179, that all-American highway. They then go on up to Flagstaff and to Grand Canyon. There's another linkage there. But if you take a look at the greater Sedona area, we're talking about, for example, common library system, common fire district, common school system, many, many organizations that work transparently through the entire community. Dividing those two areas along county lines, Coconino and Yavapai, would weaken our ability to be heard and to have our needs addressed. And so I'm just strongly recommending that as you take a look at what can be done, you try every effort to keep the city of Sedona, the surrounding areas, and the greater Sedona area whole. Obviously, being part of the Verde Valley is important. There are many other factors that you have to consider, but from our perspective, that one is really paramount. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Karen O'Brien, professor representing himself.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Karen O'Brien, K-E-R-A-N, capital O, apostrophe, capital B-R-I-E-N. I live in the Big Park section of Sedona. I ask you to affirm the proposed map for District 1 and the corresponding legislative district with the addition of as much of the Verde Valley as possible, but at least including all of the Sedona area, both the city of Sedona and the adjacent unincorporated areas and the village. There are 3 reasons for this. First, the main northbound route from Phoenix is Interstate 17. It passes through the Verde Valley and on up to Flagstaff. If one exits I-17 at exit 298, one is in Sedona. The distance through Sedona to Flagstaff is actually less than the distance from exit 298 to Flagstaff along I-17. I-17 goes nowhere near Prescott. No one goes to Flagstaff through Prescott. The tourist industry on which both Sedona and Flagstaff area rely typically exits I-17 at exit 298, passes through Sedona, and then goes on up to Flagstaff to visit the Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, the Hopi Mesas, and other areas north of here. We represent a single economic unity. Second, the Black Hills of Arizona represent a formidable barrier to travel between the Prescott area and the Verde Valley. They refer to us as the other side of the mountain. The Prescott area is geographically and I might add, ecologically distinct from the Verde Valley. Third, Northern Arizona University is an important resource for the area, especially the Sedona area. We go up there to attend lectures and hear concerts. Some of the faculty actually live in the Sedona area. We have no such connection to the Prescott area. Let me add that we faithfully attend the Coconino Fair held every year during the Labor Day weekend.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Dorothy O'Brien.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Herrera. He's a tough act to follow. My name is Dorothy O'Brien, capital D-O-R-O-T-H-Y, capital O, apostrophe, capital B-R-I-E-N. I am the immediate past president of Big Park Regional Coordinating Council. I am the chairperson for our task force on redistricting, but I am here speaking as citizen Dorothy, just myself. And the first thing I would like to do, after thanking the commissioners for their really tireless efforts here, it's much appreciated, is to thank the men and women who have served our country. I haven't heard anyone do that yet, and Veterans Day is approaching us, and here we have a room full of people. Many of you have served in the armed services, and I just want to say thank you. If I may say, I have testified to this commission on 2 other occasions, so this will be my 3rd. So what I would like to say is the following. Paramount to to me, because I'm speaking for me personally, is that our greater Sedona area be kept intact. That it be kept intact as one unit, as for all the reasons that you've heard previously spoken, we share so many services and common interests, as well as an economic driver, which is our tourism. More than 3 million tourists come through that gateway at 179. It's astonishing. And for the most purposes, they're heading through our community to see the beautiful red rocks, enjoy parts of the Verde Valley, maybe go on the Canyon Railroad, and then on up to Grand Canyon or Hopi Land and the Navajo lands and so on. So, and this is paramount. The second part is that we are indeed part of the Verde Valley community. We feel strongly about this community, but the third part of that is that we have a demonstrated disregard from our elected officials that are in the Prescott area. Prescott is considered the hub of that political base, and we are not, as a community, as a body, as a community of interest, are not considered. The things that are important to us aren't heard, legislation, decisions are made, and none of our representatives, other than our own supervisor, Chip Davis, come into our community to hear what we have to say, to ask our opinions about things and find out what our concerns and needs are. I would ask you to help us as a community look at the next 10 years. Give us a shot at having better representation, more equitable opportunities for our needs to be heard and met. We have many good neighbors in Yavapai County, no question, but we also have a great, strong history with the Flagstaff area. And I would appeal to you to look at that for us. Give us another chance. Please help us make the next 10 years different than these previous 10 years. And with that, I will end my remarks and say thank you again for your service.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Mike Cosentino, representing himself.
Hi, I'm Mike Cosentino, M-I-K-E-C-O-S-E-N-T-I-N-O. No relation to Sandra. I no longer feel unique in the Verde Valley. When I moved here in just a little history, I guess. First of all, when Rob Adams said, Richard Daynard and Sandra will cut my speech real short. Keep the Verde Valley whole, if at all possible, whatever lines you have to draw to do that. I personally wish you could have stopped at the grid and not have applied the other 6 criteria. We wouldn't be here today if you had laid the grid down on population but that's, I understand Constitution and things like that. When I moved to Sedona in 1972, we hearkened toward Flagstaff. I lived in Oak Creek Canyon, lived in Sedona. The students in uptown Sedona went to school in Flagstaff. We did our shopping in Flagstaff. There was nothing in Sedona in those days. When I was on the volunteer fire department in Sedona, everything came through Flagstaff. Sedona, it was a surprise of those of us in Oak Creek Canyon that Sedona actually became something worthwhile. But yet there it is. My point is, whatever decision you have to make, Verde Valley whole if possible. I understand that the current maps that you're drawing that is not working out, but if you do have to choose, we want to be part of Flagstaff. Thank you.
The next speaker representing himself is Richard Surley.
I only get surly when I'm mad. It's Richard Searle, and it's R-I-C-H-A-R-D and S-E-A-R-L-E. And I've heard many people express similar opinions to mine in regard to Sedona. I'm representing myself. I appreciate that in your current maps you do show Sedona, the town of Sedona, as being kept together. There are some things that should be adjusted. I think that, for instance, West Sedona, some of the precincts are actually split. So I think you want to review that. We have 10 precincts in the greater Sedona area, and I think you should look at those boundaries. And I think if you did take those into account, they would include the village of Oak Creek. So I think that that would be something that would be really worthwhile. I also appreciate the fact that we were split in half between 2 counties. I guess this is sort of a case where the town happened and they'd drawn the lines before the town. But in any case, our general perspective, my perspective, is that as a community of interest, it's Sedona, the village of Oak Creek, and my personal dealings and my friends are business-wise, culturally, are to the great extent with Flagstaff. And that's not taking anything away from the people to the west of us, but I will say that when I first moved to Sedona approximately 30 years ago, Prescott was over the hill and it was a journey to get there, and it still is, and we really don't hear from what's going on over there. And you can move the boundaries to wherever you want, but they don't change the way people relate to each other. It's people themselves. So what I'm advocating is I appreciate the boundaries you have now as far as CD1 is concerned for the congressional district, and I would like to see those extended a little bit more so they do include the greater Sedona area, and that's really in the Oak Creek Canyon Basin area, if you look at that. I think I've probably run through all of this, except to say that I'm also disturbed by the attempts of politicians to influence the outcome of the deliberations of this commission, and I hope that it all turns out for the better, that your decisions will not be dictated by the legislature. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, it's either Gary or Erie Lemaster.
I guess I have to work on my handwriting. It's Gary Lemaster, and it's G-A-R-Y-L-A, capital M-A-S-T-E-R. I live in Cornville. In the spirit of full disclosure, I'm the president of the Democrats of the Verde Valley, but I'm speaking for myself. As you know, voter registrations in Arizona are relatively evenly split between Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. But based on yesterday's actions by the governor and the Senate, it would appear that Republicans are unhappy with the redistricting maps that will allow them to retain a majority of congressional representatives and all but guarantee dominance of 16 of 30 legislative districts. Instead, it would appear the Republicans feel entitled to continue their supermajority. As a result of yesterday's actions, your job has been made even more difficult. I feel like the I has been taken out of the IRC. If the primary goal of redistricting is to keep communities of interest intact, as Governor Brewer and Senator Pierce claim, the Verde Valley should remain in the eastern rural district of CD1. We have much more in common with the areas to the north and the east, as many people have said, than we do with the west. Jerome, Clarkdale, Cottonwood, Sedona, and Flagstaff share an economy based on tourism and a concern for the environment that attracts our tourists. The same is true when it comes to legislative districts. If creating communities of interest is a goal, the Verde Valley should be included with Sedona and Flagstaff. The mountains between the Verde Valley and Prescott are an obvious physical barrier, but the difference in interests are even more profound. For example, the Verde River that is the centerpiece of this valley is in real and constant threat by political interests on the other side of the mountains. It appears that politicians in Prescott and Prescott Valley would rather drain the Big Chino aquifer that feeds the river than implement sensible water conservation. Placing the Verde Valley watershed in a competitive district with the Coconino Plateau will help us preserve this vital resource. Unfortunately, for those of us who live in the Verde Valley, legislative and county offices have been dominated by the other side of the mountain. It's time that the Verde Valley enjoyed real representation, including the entire Verde Valley and the same congressional and legislative districts as Sedona and Flagstaff will help accomplish that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Joan McClelland, representing herself.
Thank you. That's Joan, J-O-A-N, M-C, capital C-L-E-L-L-A-N-D. Thank you for being here today, Vice Chair. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to come just from the village of Oak Creek to Cottonwood and not have to go to Prescott Valley and all over the place. Thank you so much. You can tell by the crowd here that lots of people are very grateful also. I gave you a copy of this map, and I'll give it to, well, you've all the commissioners have got a copy of the map. There are 8 voting precincts in the Yavapai County portion of Sedona. 5 of the 8 will be split with your present District 1 congressional map. This is really almost intolerable. That means, for example, the Big Park, so-called Big Park precinct will have will be in 2 congressional districts. This should be corrected. The Greater Sedona area shares many communities of interest. The Greater Sedona area should be in CD1 with Flagstaff. The village of Oak Creek, which is where I live, Big Park Village of Oak Creek, has 3 precincts, and they're immediately south of the incorporated city of Sedona. The village is the southern gateway to the Red Rock country, a scenic destination for travelers from all over the United States and overseas. Some of the most photographed rock formations are in the so-called village, Bell Rock, Cathedral Rock, and Courthouse, to name a few. Precincts Red Rock West and Red Rock 2, with their red rock formations, are the gateway for visitors coming from the west. We are all integral parts of Sedona. The visitors traveling up Highway I-17 through the Verde Valley are coming to see the Red Rock country of Sedona and then on to Flagstaff and the Grand Canyon. The Greater Sedona area should be with the I-17 Verde Valley corridor communities of Camp Verde, Rib Rock, and Lake Montezuma, and with Flagstaff. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Chip Davis, Yavapai County Supervisor.
Howdy, Chip Davis. Welcome to Yavapai County. And I have to start off with, it's hard to criticize volunteers, so I'll try to be very respectful in my comments. We have testified on this before. We've sent in letters and we've testified over at the Prescott hearings. And I don't know that any of that testimony or written submissions made it into the draft maps because they don't look like what we asked for. You indicated you had a hard time reading Bill Regner's handwriting, and I noted I had a hard time reading your maps. You know, you guys have had just a hair of controversy in this whole process. So I'm not really quite sure where we stand today. I know over the past week there's been so doggone much movement going on politically that it's bound to be hard to be a volunteer on this thing, but sometimes I think we get so entwined with things that it gets confusing. We actually take a simple method and it turns into a very confusing method. In my observation, we have 15% that are usually far to the left, and we usually have 15% that are far to the right. And I think those are probably the 30% that y'all hear a lot of. But what I'd like to ask you to consider is the 70% of the mainstream citizen that's out there. Politics is not pretty nor desired or viewed upon very favorably by most mainstream folks, and that's because we do politicize it and we take out the common sense of it. And what I would ask the Redistricting Commission, could you put the common sense back into it? Let's make it as easy as possible for citizens to understand what our boundaries are, to understand that the boundaries make sense, to understand that our boundaries include our neighbors and our friends and the communities that we grow up with and we befriend. I know it's different from metropolitan areas. Rural communities have one thing in common, and that is that our strength is in combining our efforts to accomplish things. And there's been some comments in regards to the water issues in Yavapai County, and I'll be the first to admit they have been very controversial, and we haven't had solution yet. But I would much rather be sitting at the table with those folks than not have us there at the table to where decisions could be made without our input. So I think it's diversity that keeps us healthy, and I think that it's pretty important that we sit at that table and we keep an eye on the things that affect both of us. I think what I've been hearing mostly from folks, and I know most of the folks that have been up here today, is they're not really doing a Democrat versus Republican argument. I think mostly what everybody's saying is that we want to stick together as communities. We want to know the kids that we watched in football and growing up, that they're going to become our elected officials. They're people that we know. It's not people from far outlying areas that we have no idea, because we're going to end up with politicians that way, and we'd rather elect people that we know and that are going to do good, honest work for the state of Arizona and for our communities. And that's the best I can ask you, is just keep it manageable and keep it responsive, and let's try to make it easy for every citizen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Angela Lefebvre, and I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Angela, A-N-G-E-L-A, Lefevre, capital L-E, capital F-E-V-R-E. And I am an American citizen. So, anyway, I'm here. Had to say that. I'm here for myself, though. I'm outgoing president of the Democrats of the Red Rocks, which is not important for the Democrats' perspective, but the fact that we are of the Red Rocks and we cover the whole Red Rock area. So we have a big club with hundreds of members, both from the village of Oak Creek and from Sedona. And that is just one of many clubs that cover the area of the greater Sedona. And as everybody else is saying, we are friends, we work together, and we shop together, and we experience the same things as far as the growing community is concerned. So I've said this before, and I hope you will correct those mistakes with our 10 precincts, that they all are going to be in a congressional district together. It wouldn't work to go by county lines because, as people have pointed out, part of Sedona is in Coconino County, part in Yavapai County. So a decision has to be made which way we go. I would love to see not just Greater Sedona, but also the Verde Valley being up north with the Flagstaff area in CD1, if that were possible, just as you've been able to do it for the legislative district. I feel one of the important things, and one gentleman brought it out, is the competitiveness. Even though I am a registered Democrat, our club is open to independents, and independents making such a strong voice today. If we're in a competitive district, we will have a stronger voice. And I think that's very, very important for us in the Greater Sedona area. We have strong environmental points of view, which are very important to us. Right now, for instance, in the past, we were able to put forward some legislation into Congress regarding the National Scenic Area for the area, to protect our lands, to protect our red rocks. I think it's important that we're able to continue doing that and have our say. And that would mean having people who would listen to us. You know, we get into our local area issues, but I think our issues are more than that. They're Arizona issues, they're also national issues. And I think people in Sedona, the Greater Sedona area, should be able to feel that they have a national voice in those many, many issues that impact us, especially environmental ones. So your help here would be wonderful. I'm sorry that your own committee is not intact anymore. We appreciate all the work you have done and hope you continue, and hopefully will be allowed to maintain your independence. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Tony, and I'm going to spell the last name Gioia, former mayor of Camp Verde.
Thank you for not abusing my name. I really appreciate that. My name is Tony Gioia, TonyGioia. Good afternoon to the commission representatives and to, excuse my back. I was not prepared to speak today. However, one thing moved me. I've heard and understand that there are now 3 concepts for what to do with the Verde Valley, which is certainly my main concern. And by the way, I'm speaking for myself, although more than a quarter of my life has been spent in public service as an elected official. Today I'm speaking for myself. The Verde Valley, citizens are split from what I have heard with the concept of retaining the Verde Valley as a whole, with separating the Verde Valley and attaching ourselves to Flagstaff, which we do have a considerable community of interest with. And today, the concept of both Coconino and Yavapai counties joining in the larger district, which is intriguing. All 3 of these possibilities have advantages and disadvantages. What I'm here to address is not those, but the Verde Valley. The Verde Valley is a family, has been a traditional, historic family through its growth, and that, when I name the Verde Valley, I'm naming the cities and towns of the Verde Valley, the communities, the outlying communities, and the Sedona area and outlying communities, just so there's no mistaking it. We have several interests, a number of interests that tie us together besides our microclimate, our economy, and most importantly, the Verde River watershed. What I will ask you for is to keep the family together. We may occasionally have differences within the family, but whenever there is a subject that addresses the survival of the family, we do come together. Our history shows we've been together and interdependent, so I would ask you to keep the Verde Valley, which includes Sedona and surrounding neighborhoods, together. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dia Brasgalia, representing herself. Michelle, would you like to take a break after this? We do. So let's take you want to take a quick break? Well, we have a court reporter that if she needs a break, we will take a break. So we'll take a break after this.
Good afternoon. My name is Dia Brasgala. That's DEA BRASGALLA. I feel like I must make this statement first. I am appalled by the legislative move to remove Chairwoman Mathis and to try to disrupt the work of the commission. It is a shameful act on the part of the governor and the Republican legislatures who voted to move her. That said, I wish to stress again the fact that Sedona and Greater Sedona, including Lower Loop Road and the Shadows and the village of Oak Creek, continue to be in CD1 and LD6. I would ask that the Verde Valley be included in both. I live in Rimrock, but I seldom, if ever, go to Prescott. I do my shopping, I do my medical appointments, everything is in Flagstaff. So I think that there is more interest in Flagstaff for all of these communities and would make CD1 and LD6 more competitive. Thank you for all your hard work. I certainly wouldn't want to be on this commission. Thank you.
Let's take a quick 10-minute break, and we'll be back at around 11:50. I mean, no, 12:50.
See where I am because I happen to be in Flagstaff. So, Neville, John Neville, and doesn't look like I'm going to be able to make it. Yeah, I sure did. Yeah, I've got a meeting. Another meeting. We have other meetings, so it's up. Yep. I'm at the bottom. Yeah. And Neville. Andy.
How about checking your MUHR?
Okay.
We were one of the first ones to walk in the door today. Well, then they need to change. I'm serious. I was on the redistricting committee for Gila County, and we took the questions based upon the instruments of the people and when we got them. I live in Payson. I want to get back over to Payson. So also Spencer.